Welcome aboard the Pilot Money Guys podcast, where our mission is to help professional pilots build and protect wealth on their journey to financial freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Leading Edge Financial Planning.
Hello and welcome again to the Pilot Money Guys. We have special guests today, two special guests. We have, back by popular demand, Lisa Bulldog Rosenthal. And so welcome back, Lisa. We're glad to have you. Last time you confessed your nervousness. And so I just...
Still true.
Yeah,
Still
that's right.
true.
Just for my enjoyment, I wanted you to come back and make you feel nervous again. But anyway, you do a good job on these, so we're glad to have you back.
I heard Kevin joke on the last one that back by popular demand, and he's like, my mother called.
That's right.
My mother requested me.
His fan called.
Yep.
But really, that's funny. We got Nolan Clark today. And Nolan, are you savant? What is your call sign? I don't even know. What are you, like the young savant?
You know, call me anything. It used to be the prodigy, but trying to get rid of that one.
Okay.
I don't like that one. Yeah.
It's like
Maybe we can come up with a new one.
Mark Covell said on one of the podcasts, he said, can we officially retire that stupid?
There we go. Yeah, yes. Retire it.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. But anyway, Nolan Clark is with us today. And we wanted him on here for his wit and wisdom, and join us on YouTube because we asked him to join us as well for his good looks. So just check us out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. He's a handsome feller. He's about 6'4", 220. And we just played golf the other day. So he's a talented dude.
Thank goodness we weren't recording the golf round. That's all I can say.
Okay. So it was a victory on a couple, like a victory for me and Nolan was like, hey, look, we didn't lose a ball on that hole. That was like a victory. And then for a stretch of holes there, Nolan, I'm going to throw you under the bus. It was like, hey, I don't think we hit a house on that hole. Yeah, that was a victory.
Yeah, no one got knocked out when they were sitting on their porch out by the golf course. Yeah.
Nolan has a mean slice. It's like a 90-degree.
All perspective. Little wins.
It was awesome. So we had a good time. But anyway, so we are excited today. We're going to talk a couple of items from the flight deck, some questions, some things coming up for 2026 that I think are going to be impactful. And then we're going to jump into our topic for the day, and that is the power of gratitude and all the benefits that come with that and how to practice it. And so hang with us through this one. You know, this was going to be one, you all, that we talked about. Man, I hope we get this right. I hope we communicate this right because it is such a powerful topic. I love it. Gratitude has so many side benefits and things that I think are answers to the challenges that we face. And in other words, every time I think I do a podcast about one of these topics, you know, one of the 7 answers is, an attitude of gratitude, right? Almost on everything. So we decided to tackle it head on. So I'm glad to have you all help me with that.
Well, and one of the things that we're going to argue is that it's directly correlated to your financial life. That gratitude, it sounds touchy-feely, and it is, but man, exercising gratitude reflects in your financial circumstances and your financial success exponentially.
Absolutely. So. You nailed it. And it's hard to define that. So I hope we communicate that well today. But it does. We know it does, and we'll talk to that. So, but before we move on, I want to thank everybody for taking the Pilot Wealth Index. It's been awesome to see people participate in that. So wherever you are listening to your podcast, go to your phone, whatever. There should be a link on the front of this podcast. If you select this podcast, there'll be a link to the Pilot Wealth Index. And again, we've designed questions to try to help people determine, do they have a good foundation? Are they on track? And just some financial health questions, if you will. So take that. We'll respond to you and say hello. And if you have any questions for us, we'd love to answer those as well. So don't hesitate to reach out if you would like to follow up or like us to follow up with you. So take that Pilot Wealth Index. That's been awesome to see that. And also give us a rating and review, please. And it really helps us to get our message out to our pilot community and help as many people as we possibly can with these messages, these podcasts, because that's what we're really trying to do, is just provide good information to help people with their financial health, meet financial goals, and overall just be content with their finances. That's really what we're trying to do. All right. Before we jump into our From the Flight Deck news nuggets, if you want to call them that, Nolan, give us something interesting about your life, personal fact, other than your amazing golf shot off the tee.
That would have been the last thing I brought up. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, right now it's just we're in baby mode, you know. So John Shepherd, 5 months old now, so he's you know, starting to look around a lot more and laugh a little bit, and just something new every day. Which actually, when I was thinking about this podcast, I was talking to Claire yesterday, and I was like, I've asked some of our clients, like, what's some good parenting advice you would have for me? And got a lot of different responses, as you could imagine, probably. But I would say one of the common themes is people just saying, hey, enjoy it. You know, it's going to go by so quick. And that's something that I know, and I knew going into it. It's only been 5 months, but gratitude's kind of one of those things as well. It's something you hear about, you know, I should probably be a grateful person. But today, hopefully we can attack on like maybe what are some common things that keep people from being in that mindset, and just some tangible things to do. So I think it's just always a good reminder. But for me, that would be what's the big thing going on right now. Oh, and he slept all through the night last night again. So
huge win.
That's always good. That's right. Yep.
Man, your life takes on a whole new shape when you're finally getting rest again.
It's amazing, those little milestones. Like, you showed me a video the other day of him laughing, you know, and it's like, oh, it's a huge milestone. He's laughing. And then, you know, I remember my firstborn daughter used her thumbs. I was like, look at her, use her thumbs. It's like something you never, you know, could possibly think about beforehand, that would be something kind of cool. You know what I mean? But,
absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. The child rearing days goes by fast. Sometimes we wish it would go faster. But there's also a song by Trace Atkins, country music singer, who says, you're going to miss this. And he talks about kids in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, no, that's a lie. Because we're still in the young kid.
There's an Alan Jackson song too. I can't think of the name of it, but Remember When? And it talks about like the sound of little feet down the hall.
That's right.
And I mean, that song's got to be 30 years old now. But now that my kids are big, it does bring a tear to my eye. Back then, I'm like, can we just get through these stages? But yeah, it's spot on.
Yep.
I'm like a good country song to stir up the emotions.
That's right. That's right. And while we're on this topic, we're going to cover this, like you said, Nolan, in the body of the discussion. But there's a book out now by Sahil Bloom, The 5 Types of Wealth. He's been on every podcast all over, you know, so I've seen him a lot. I've not read the book yet; it's just out. But he said, by the time your child turns 18, you've spent 95% of the time you will ever spend with them in your lifetime. So,
heart-wrenching.
That's right. How about that?
Wow.
So that'll, you know, and I've heard clients too say, hey, I have 3 summers left with my kids, 3 summers, you know, and you start counting it like that, it changes your perspective. But we'll get into that more in a minute. But what we wanted to cover really quickly was there's a couple things going on. There is this thing called, I think I'm going to just call it this, I don't know what we're all calling it, the super catch up. You know, because if you're 50 or over, you get this catch-up contribution. And this year for 2025, that normal catch-up contribution is $7,500. And you could put that into your 401k. And so, but if you turn 60, 61, 62, or 63 in the year 2025, you're eligible for another catch-up of 11,000, not another, but a total catch-up, I should say, of 11,250 instead of the normal 7,500. And so, did I say that clearly? Because to me, that age can be confusing. If you're turning 60 through 63 this year, you get the opportunity to do that. Does that make sense? The way I said that? All right, good. Because I
think so, and I guess the upshot too is that the total, you know, our clients will be able to get will be, you know, 77,500. If you're below 60 or you're 64. And then if you're 60, 63, it's going to be 81,250. It sounds weird saying.
That's right. But clear as mud.
Yeah, that's right. Clear as mud.
But you know, and you're right. The total now, the IRS limit, which is really where the big numbers start to show up, is again, if you're 50 or over. I think one of us on this call is 50 or over, but anyway.
I'm right on your heels.
Probably, and I think it's me. Just to make that clear.
I got a couple weeks to go.
So
I'm kind of excited though, because now I can do the catch ups.
That's right. So the IRS limit for me and you, Lisa, is a total of $77,500 into the 401k. That's the total IRS limit, also known as the 415 limit. But if you're those ages, 60 through 63, your limit now is 81,250. So that's pretty nice. I can't do the math quick enough in my head, but I don't know, 3,000 some dollars more. But here's the important thing. The question now becomes, well, how do I make sure I get that into my 401k? Do I need to adjust my percentage, my contribution percentage? And so there's lots of charts. There's lots of different scenarios. We can't possibly cover every one of them right now, but I thought I could boil it down into the two of the most common. And this, by the way, is assuming we're talking to airlines that have the non-elective contribution of 17%. That's a big assumption here because the math changes if that's not the case. But I think a lot of the majors right now, that's about where they're at. Soon to be 18, I think, for some of them as well. But 17% NEC, let's pretend that you make about 300 or between 3 and 400,000. You'll be safe to get all of that contribution in there at about 13%. If your contribution rate is 13%, you'll get all of that 81,250. Okay, so again, trying to boil this down as simple as possible. There's going to be a lot of little nuances I'll address in just a second. But from 300,000 to 400,000, 13% contribution rate, you're going to be safe and can pretty much assume you're going to get the full 81,250 in there. Okay, if you make 400 and above, then you could drop that down to 10% if you wanted to and still get the 81,250 in there. Okay, so those are just two general circumstances I thought might help.
Well, and the reason that we're saying this, I mean, in my mind, I envision it like you're in a race against that contribution. You don't want the company to fill up the pot before you get a chance to fill it up yourself. Right. And then you can't take full advantage of your own contribution. That's why you want to have a higher contribution rate. Yeah. And fund it earlier in the year.
But that is a concern, especially if you're contributing, if you're doing some Roth, because if you're not doing any Roth, then the situation changes a little bit and it may not matter as much but again, Lisa, to your point, if somebody, doesn't do the full amount. Let's say it's me and you, and we're not getting the super catch up, and we're doing all pre-tax. If your airline is putting in $58,000 approximately, you can simply put in the difference from $58,000 to $77,500, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if you're doing Roth, then you really, like you said, you want to race them. You want to beat the company in there because those other their contributions are pre-tax. So that can be confusing, but nonetheless, that's a good question, or excuse me, good point that you brought up.
And I'm in that world, right? I have a spouse that works with airlines. Absolutely. So it is confusing.
It is. So that could be a topic for a special video alone. Real quickly, the other interesting thing is next year, 2026, this is the IRS rule from Secure Act 2.0. This was supposed to happen in fact, it was supposed to be last year, but the IRS gave all these companies a 2-year delay. So 2026, if you're doing catch-up contributions, and this is pretty much every airline pilot, because the rule is if you make more than $145,000, which is pretty much every airline pilot, able to do the catch-up contribution, then that catch-up contribution has to be Roth. So that's supposed to go into effect next year in 2026. And so that sometimes they make that employer dependent. Again, that's why they gave them a reprieve and gave them 2 more years for the employers to prepare for this. But 2026 is supposed to go into effect. If you're 50 or over, your catch-up contribution is supposed to be Roth. Now, there's lots of other implications, lots of other scenarios that might affect you. And like you alluded to, Lisa, the ability to deduct your full contribution. So something to keep in mind. We don't have the time or not the scope of this podcast to go into all those details, but we'll put out some more information on that. So think about that, and we'll put more out later. So now, you all, we get to transition into one of our favorite topics, all three of us, and I know that's why you all volunteered to do this with me, right? Is that we love this idea of gratitude, the power of gratitude, how it affects all of our lives. But I'll start out just by kind of setting the scene a little bit, and then Lisa, Nolan, you can jump in. But I know in my own life, it feels like the time goes by so fast. It's like Friday, Monday, Friday, summer's here, winter's gone. It's like, oh my goodness, am I being a good steward of my time? Am I taking time to enjoy, like we talked about, the kids in the house? And am I grumpy? Am I grouchy? And what I've found is if I get into some kind of daily routine of gratitude, practicing gratitude, that it does help me. I mean, it feels like it slows down time because I just take a few minutes to think and take inventory. And it helps me a little bit less irritable sometimes, because you really start to realize, oh, wow, we have all these blessings, But Lisa, what do you got?
No, when I read that in your notes, I felt exactly the same. You go from Sunday to Monday to Sunday to Monday. The minute I blink, the week is starting over again. Shane and I have talked about how quickly my husband and I, about the last 8 years since he retired from the Marine Corps, and had the 24 in the Marine Corps gone by as quickly as the last 8. We're worried that we're not stopping to smell the roses, right? It's just, we're in the grind and life is really good, but you got your head down and go, go, go. And same thing with you. We've got kids that are growing. I've got a daughter who's coming home probably for her last summer from college this year. And then I'm sure she's going to be off in her own apartment. And really trying to stop and look back on this time and how have we filled it, that it hasn't just raced by. It's gone by quickly because we have filled it with incredible opportunities or challenges that we've learned from. And just really stopping to pause and look back on how that time was spent and being glad for what we chose to do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'm trying to, we want to make this, like any podcast, relevant to our clients, our financial planning process. And with all of our clients, one of our steps in the process is just sitting down and thinking, what is retirement going to look like? And it doesn't even have to be retirement. For myself, it could be, that's a little bit of ways away. It could be what's our short and midterm goals. And I think with that, it takes focus, it takes intentionality. And I think that's what being, gratitude is about. It does take focus and intentionality. And I wrote down, I don't think gratitude is settling or not having ambition. It helps you see more clearly. So that way you can maybe direct your ambition to what matters most to you. Because, you talked about, slowing down to smell the roses. If you don't do that, you're really going to kind of lose sight of what is important. So when we sit down to talk about retirement goals, it might be hard to think about, and what do I want to do in retirement? Because I haven't thought about this before. But gratitude to me is like slowing down and thinking, what's in my life right now that I'm grateful for, that I want to continue to have, that I'm content with. So hopefully, we'll get more into that and how that is relevant on the financial planning side. And there's all kinds of statistics, as I'm sure we'll mention, that show that and kind of back up that gratitude can make for happier, healthier, and financial well-being.
Yeah. All right, that's enough. Podcast over. Nolan nailed it. But no, that's good. That's good, and it is amazing how it is interwoven in everything in our financial and even sometimes non-financial lives as well. But the other side of the coin, as far as time goes by fast, are we enjoying the moments? Or are we stopping to smell the roses? The other side of that coin is, in the last week or two, I've had probably 3 conversations where people said, "Hey, I have this medical diagnosis, and it's a game changer, right? So we're going to do some things differently." And those different things are going to be different for everyone. Maybe it means building that dream home a little sooner than you thought, or maybe it means working a little less sometimes. Maybe it means working more. There's nothing wrong with those things. Maybe you work more for this goal and whatever, but it just changes our perspective. And I started to think after those conversations, I was like, you know what? I'm really sorry that you received that news or you feel that way. But man, I appreciate at this moment, your mindset now is probably healthier than it was before. And I want to adopt that. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think we're going to dig into this a little bit more as we go through the podcast, but having a mindset of gratitude, either going into a difficult circumstance like that or coming out of a difficult circumstance like that, builds in such resiliency, right? This horrible thing may have happened, but the gratitude is it's giving you this fresh perspective, right? We're really going to lean into these life experiences or lean into these relationships, or you run into that rough spot in the road and you're like, hey, I've been in hard spots before. And I learned good things from them, and being grateful for having gotten through a hard spot before. And so the next one is less difficult. The resiliency that comes from it is really powerful.
It is. It's almost like a paradox where, if everything's gone well in your life the whole time and you just kind of, I don't know anybody like that, but nonetheless, it seems like people that have faced adversity and have gone through some things, they are almost more grateful. It's just almost a paradox. Like, oh, wait a second, you're going through this terrible, I'll just throw out, cancer diagnosis or situation, but yet they're grateful. Like, oh, I'm grateful that there's hope I can get through this, or the treatments are going well. I mean, it's really almost amazing to see that. Like, oh, wow, how are you doing that? But it's incredible. And I think you're right. I love that point, Lisa. That attitude of gratitude creates that resiliency and that ability to get through those really difficult times. So that's great. And back to the financial planning, retirement kind of perspective. The markets have been a little crazy this year, right? We've seen some stuff early in the year. It's like, oh man, this will get your attention, especially if you're getting ready to retire. And so it kind of shakes you a little bit, right? And so it's certainly a good time, or it's a little bit easier, I should say, if you've already built that attitude of gratitude and that mindset of abundance to kind of go, hey, we're going to be okay. We have these things. And like you said, Lisa, most of our people that we work with and people that we know, they've been there before where they've had little and they know that they've been fine, which is pretty amazing as well. So first phase here that we'll talk to is the mindset. Why does the mindset matter? And it's so powerful. Before we get into the practical steps of, hey, do this, do that, or here's some ideas, I should say, what kind of mindset do you all think about? Or what do you think about when you think of a mindset of gratitude? And why is that so important? Lisa, what do you got on that?
I think about learning from your mistakes or learning from those difficult times. When you have the conversations with people, like, tell me about a time when you made a horrible mistake and how did that feel? Or, and I look back and I'm like, I can't think of. I've made a lot of mistakes, but they've all turned out to be something really good. Mm-hmm. So it's erased the negative connotation that came with perhaps the difficult experience or the error in judgment.
I was thinking about what you said, Lisa, as far as, struggles and things that we go through. And I remember we were doing one of our team retreats. And we were going around the room, we were asking people about, I think it was about successful moments or good moments, but every one of those almost, I remember, was started with the struggle. Isn't that amazing?
It was your most proud.
Yes.
We asked kind of what was something you're really proud of, or a challenge you faced that you're proud of.
Right. Mm-hmm. But this idea of mindset is so critical because what we believe to be true turns into our actions. In fact, Gandhi said something to the effect of, belief into words. If we speak those words, it turns into actions, and that turns into our destiny, right? But nonetheless, we can simplify that a little bit by saying, hey, what we believe is what we do. And we carry out. And so our thoughts translate into words, the way we communicate and express ourselves. And our words in turn influence our actions, the way we behave and react in the world. So this idea of taking stock or inventory of our blessings, what we're grateful for, has a major impact. And that's scientific. I don't want to, just think this is fluff. This is the way our brains work. And so you had a quote in here, Lisa, and that was, whether you think you can or can't, either way, you're right, because.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah.
I love that quote.
Yeah. I think the other one's, the more you choose to see it, the more you will see it and attract it into your life. Abundance is everywhere. in life: simple joys, friends, time, access to resources, etc. So I thought that was really good too that you had put in there.
Well, and I think the reason that we're putting extra emphasis on this topic right now is because there is a lot of unrest going on in the world right now. We're experiencing market volatility and societal shifts, and it's really easy to get sucked into that cycle of fear and concern, and things are falling apart. And I really, man, humanity is good though. And so if you stop, get out of the cycle and focus on the good, we talk about the good begets good, like positive thinking begets more positive thinking. And that just reverberates throughout your whole experience and your financial approach. When you're seeing the volatility in the markets, when you're feeling gratitude for your experience in the past and you're seeing a positive outlook, you're not going to have an irrational reaction. You won't panic it's going to be uncomfortable, but you won't panic. And that sense of confidence in what you're doing, even in a time of unrest, is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's just amazing the power of our mind and what we allow into our mind. And we'll talk about the news in a second, which is not great.
And your mindset is one of the things in a world where you feel like you can't control a lot.
Yeah.
This is one thing you can control. You can control the perspective at which you approach your life's experience.
That's right.
It's something you can put your hands around.
That's right. So I love that word perspective. And so you've given me the green light to tell my It's a Wonderful Life story. That's me and Nolan's favorite movie. Lisa, I don't know about you. Do you watch this movie?
I'm a fan of the story. I'm not a fan of the execution. Yeah.
The execution.
Shane tells me I'm un-American because
exactly.
It's not like I can't bring myself to. I love the storyline.
So I got into this. Well, I just started looking into a couple things, and it's amazing how psychologists have broken down this movie and the lessons because and here's what I get from it. It's pretty amazing because. Obviously, I say obviously, everybody knows It's a Wonderful Life. So I'm just going to assume that you know that. If you don't, Google it, watch it, whatever. You have to watch it every year at Christmas. But George Bailey, the main character, he's the guy that had to stay home to take over the family business. His brother went off to be an athlete, and I think he went off to be a World War II hero. And so, but George Bailey's this, quote unquote loser that has to stay home and run the family business, right? And he's tired of his job. He's tired of his circumstances, and he's angry. And then there's this moment where they lose money in the bank. And so it kind of puts him over the edge. And he goes home. I remember in the movie, he's yelling at his kids, yelling at his wife. He's angry. And then he goes to end his life. He's had enough. And so that's when his guardian angel comes along. And I'll summarize, get to the good stuff. I don't want to ruin it in case somebody's seen it, right? It was in 1940. But anyway, there are two ideas here that as his guardian angel takes him on this tour, right, of life without George Bailey. So there's two things. One of those is called the butterfly effect. And Lisa, I think you may have mentioned it too, this ripple effect. But the psychologists call this the butterfly effect, where the small acts from you or from George Bailey in this movie had a profound impact on everyone around him. So he got to see the world as it would have been without him. And, so that's pretty phenomenal to think about the little things. And again, that's that gratitude coming back into play where, the little things that we do have a big impact, butterfly effect, they call it, the psychologists will call that. And so the second thing that he got to see, and psychologists call this one mental subtraction, where he got to see his life without all the things that he loved. And so psychologists will recommend that you sit down and you take inventory of the things in your life and then pretend as if they're not there. And that's where the subtraction piece comes in. And so that's
a really powerful exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah. So he comes back from this experience with his guardian angel, and he walks in the same house, has got the same job, the same people, nothing has changed. And he is as happy as he possibly can be. I mean, so to me, that's just a really powerful story the way it's told there. So I'm Nolan, I got cold chills. Do you have cold chills?
I do, and I got to say a few things about it too, because the last thing you said there is, perspective changes everything, right? He walks back into the same house, same circumstances, nothing has changed except his mindset, and so perspective changes everything. And then secondly, Clarence, the guardian angel you were talking about, I always love his quote, "No man is a failure who has friends." That's the little message he left for George. And I think that goes back to retirement. I mean, it can be before retirement too. Not saying you don't have friends until you're retired, but sometimes that's what we see our clients struggle with, is that, you've spent all these years working and your life changes drastically after you retire. And so that's kind of the soft side of retirement. But, just thinking about what will retirement look like? Maybe how can I prepare for this community after I retire? Because that's what a lot of, studies show that makes for a longer lifespan, potentially improves your health, your well-being, is that, if you have this community to be around. So maybe, if you had there was a study, the question was, if you had the opportunity to turn the clock back 5 years before retirement, is there anything you do differently to plan for it? And one of the most common responses was, I would have developed friends and activities for before or for after I retire. So that way you're almost preparing for retirement before it happens. And so we're really just practicing retirement. But Lisa, you sound like you.
There's such a tendency to focus on the financial aspect, right? Will there be enough to keep a roof over my head? And we just get this myopic focus on the dollars. And then you get there and the dollars are fine. How do you fill your day? I've seen the same, and I've seen that play out in real life too, with people where they suddenly got there and they kind of forgot about the other sense of fulfillment that needs to move into that space. 100%, Nolan. Yeah, you're right on.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, every human needs a sense of purpose and fulfillment. It's the same through our, a lot of people get that through their work. And so that's the hard thing when you retire, is like, are you retiring into something? And so maybe that can help with that. And then my last thing was just a lesson from It's a Wonderful Life. Then we can move on. It's just is that things don't always go as planned. George Bailey had this huge plan for his life, and really his brother got to do everything I think he wanted to do, travel the world and all this. But it just made me think of the financial planning piece of that. When we prepare our clients' financial plans, we know the one thing that's going to be right about the financial plan is that it's going to be wrong. Our assumptions, everything is not always going to go as planned, but it's like anything in life. When you plan for it, it's bound to go better than if you just didn't plan at all. And I'm sure there's all kinds of small examples of that, where it's for a party or a wedding or whatever it may be. If you plan, it's bound to be better, even if things don't always go as planned. And so I know we talked about the turmoil right now, but that is baked in to the plan in some ways, that markets aren't always going to do amazing. And I think that's one lesson that we could learn.
Well, there's the saying, right? The only constant is change. Right?
That's right.
The only thing that will reliably, consistently happen every time is change. Yeah.
So anyway, and it's a wonderful life. Let me talk about that some more. Oh, no, that's awesome. We're not going to talk about that anymore.
He's a little whiny. Like, he has such a good heart, but he's just a little whiny.
Okay, we won't talk about it anymore. But I thought I'd torture Lisa one more time. But anyway, so no, it's good, Nolan. You nailed it, man. There's a lot of good wisdom in what you said there. That's incredible. Before we move on to some practical steps, though, Lisa, you had put in some of the, pre-show prep, this attitude or mindset of scarcity versus abundance. And I love this idea. I don't think I can articulate it very well, but I think about it a lot. And, what are your thoughts on this, and how does it help us as far as, our quality of our lives?
I wrote down, because it is hard to articulate. So I'll share that I stole some definitions from the internet. And it's a journey that I think we're all continuously on. It says abundance mindset is the belief that you have enough, not only that you have enough, but that you'll always have what you need. It's kind of trust and belief in yourself and in So the goodness of humanity. And scarcity is where you're focused on the limitations and the fear, and I can't, or they won't, or and it's the conflict of the two. Human survival instincts, I think, kick in, and they take us down that scarcity path. And then our tribal collaborative work as a society takes us down the abundance path. And it's a balance of the two. And I know as a firm, we talk about operating with a mindset of abundance, and abundance in serving our clients and serving one another, and really approaching things with that sense of optimism, and knowing that, assume that good was meant, or assume that good will come out of whatever the experience is that we go through. Yeah,
absolutely. I actually, like many of the books that I've read like the first third of them. And so I can't confess to reading this entire book, but I want to. It's called Scarcity. And it is an excellent book and gives just like real practical examples of this scarcity mindset. And basically it's wanting something so badly, and maybe for the wrong reasons or maybe for the right reasons, but wanting it so badly, there's a fear-based situation there. One practical example was in the book, he said, firefighters, for example, a lot of them will die, I think, of, I can't remember the top thing, but it may be heart failure. But the second thing I think he said was there's often accidents on the way to the fire, because they're so desperate to get to this fire and they want to do it so quickly that they forget to buckle in, or they forget to do something. And on that truck, as it rounds the corner, they're out. I mean, and I was like, what? I mean, and you know what I mean? You want something so badly that you don't take the time to do something that could literally save your life. And so I thought that was one thing, and an example that stuck in my mind from that book anyway.
Yeah, you're focused so much on the acquisition or the future, the next thing, that you are not enjoying the moment today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I had written down, defining the difference between abundance and scarcity is you're focusing on what's missing.
Yeah.
What's missing? What do I not have? What's not working? But abundance is you're focusing on what's working, what's going well, what's making me happy.
That's where that gratitude comes from. Nolan, what do you got?
Charlie, I was actually going to toss it back to you for a story from the book we read, because I think you tell it well, but it's about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and their third business partner a lot of people don't know about, because he had a scarcity mindset. But if you don't mind to share that, I think that's a really
that's from The Psychology of Money, wasn't it? Is that the book together?
Morgan Housel.
Yeah, I did not know, and we read that book together as a team, but I didn't know there was the third, the third wheel there of the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger trio. But Warren Buffett was quoted in that book of saying, hey, we knew that if we did these things, eventually we would all be wealthy. And we were satisfied with that, and we just knew that the steps, again, like the firefighter that didn't quite buckle in right, or whatever it might be. We knew that if we took these steps, this would happen. We had faith, we had confidence, Lisa, like you were talking about. But this third person, I can't remember his name, wanted it so badly that he started doing things that were not quite, in line with long-term wealth, and it went badly. And it didn't happen. I think he lost. I can't remember if he lost his portion of the wealth or whatever. But that was
he kind of wanted that instant gratification, whereas Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett realized what they had was good, and if they waited, like we always talk about in investing, it's a great investing lesson. Really, it's like compound interest. It doesn't come like that. It takes over years and years, but it'll finally come. But yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, that's an interesting fact. But let's we got a few minutes left here, so let's jump into the practical. Right, we've talked about the mindset, which is super powerful, but what about the practical? And Lisa, you made some steps there for us. Let's start though with how do we practice gratitude, and then we can, again, maybe some simple little steps that people can adopt as habits if they're not already doing these things that can help.
The first example that comes to my mind is something that I've actually honed in by being a parent, is when my kids look out on the world and they're like, oh, it's the worst. My experience is the worst. The teacher is the worst. I didn't make the team, whatever is the worst. And without discrediting the experience that they're having, this is difficult. and somebody does have it better, but somebody does have it worse than you too. So to pause and have that perspective that you can acknowledge that you're going through something difficult, or you haven't yet achieved what you yearn to, but to also look behind you and say, look how far I've come, or look at the struggles I've overcome where people are still sitting in that place. And I have found for me that practice has been really beneficial, to capture that sense of gratitude and capture the good that, especially, we're a Marine Corps family, right? So 24 years of slogging through having the military completely dictate our life. And those were some tough years. Man, I'm so grateful, though, the opportunity to experience those challenges and hardships and communities and friends. And I wouldn't have any of that. So looking behind you is I think a really practical way to start getting into the gratitude mindset.
That's good. Remember The Gap and the Gain?
Yeah.
I started reading that again, about a third through that one. And I think I'm good through that one. Nolan, what do you got?
Mine's maybe hopefully not too controversial, but I think maybe limiting social media. Actually, that's one that I no longer have social media, which may sound weird for a young fella, but I decided to give that up about a year and a half or so ago. And maybe it doesn't have to be as extreme as just giving it up, but limiting it. They say it takes about 3 months to build a habit. I would be interested to see how your mindset would change if you, just spent some time away from that and give it some time, of course, just like anything, to build that habit. But, if you think about it, social media can be used for all kinds of different things, but a lot of it is news or what other people are doing. And what is gratitude about? It's about looking at what's going on in my life that I'm thankful for. And so when you're looking always at what other people have and maybe their highlight of their life or the best, 10% of it, it's very hard to focus on what am I grateful for? What's going on in my life? Charlie Munger, speaking of him, he had a quote. It said, "The world is not driven by greed, it's driven by envy."
Yeah.
So that tells me, it's like, not if we were just left to our own devices and didn't have all these other distractions, like, would we really want these other things? So maybe that's a good thing to think about if you're wanting to get more. How much is enough? Why do you want it? Is it because you really want it, or is it because someone else has it? Is it adding value to your life? So that would be my top one.
I would say, to build on what you're saying, Nolan, is to become more aware of the outside influences. Be sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who have a perspective of gratitude and optimism, and surround yourself with the messaging, right? If you are going to stay on social media, like, watch cute cat and dog videos, right? Things that make you smile instead of stir envy or fear. Just be really mindful of those external influences and consciously choose optimism and gratefulness in your friends and your media consumption.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, it's just amazing. And in fact, I'm going to pile on a little bit, because that was one of the ones I had where, the news media and what we put in our minds. We talked about this earlier. I think there's a quote attributed to Gandhi that says, "I will not let someone with dirty feet walk in my mind," something to that effect. But it is, our minds are so powerful. I was listening lately to a TED Talk. I know, super nerdy, but it's his name is Peter Sage. It's a TED Talk, The Power of the Unconscious Mind. So Google that, look it up. It's great. But he comes down even more than you, Nolan. He's like, basically he says, for those of you who think the mainstream media is about reporting the news, I got news for you. You're in Disneyland. So, I mean, he comes down pretty hardcore. But the fascinating thing is he talks about how adaptive we are as human beings. Physically, we're adaptive. And mentally, it's the same thing. If you listen to music, if we hang out for a couple of weeks together and you all listen to music I listen to, eventually you'll adapt to it. You may not love it, but you'll become familiar with it. And that's just the way our brains work, our minds work. So it is this idea. And he says the two biggest things that impact us in the way we think, again, this is back to the gratitude part, is they're unconsciously affect our minds, is the mainstream media and the peer group that we hang out with, right? And you all just mentioned both of those things. And so he says, turn off the news. And again, that's where he talks about the mainstream media. He goes on to say, in the article we read, you all too, the negativity bias. Our brains are wired to overweight the negative. And that's a survival mechanism. If you're gonna about to be in a car crash, your brain is going to overweight the negative to try to save your life. That's the way it works. But in a lot of things, it doesn't help us. So he goes on to say the job of the mainstream media is to stimulate another part of our brain called the amygdala. Which is designed to notice that negative before the positive, again, for the reasons I just said. And obviously the mainstream media needs to attract viewers and advertisers, and that's what their goal is. And they're not a charity, So he goes on to say, I've not watched news in 17 years. And he says, I'm pretty sure it's the same stuff happening to different people. But the last thing I'll end with that TED Talk, which I think was awesome. He said, watching the news all the time is like going to the Amazon rainforest at night. There's lots of amazing things going on. And then envision the news media taking your flashlight and putting it on a snake eating a rat. That's what they want you to see. Of all these beautiful, amazing things that may be happening, your flashlight is on that. And he says, I'm going to choose to point my flashlight, somewhere else. And so that my amazingly adaptive mind doesn't get overwhelmed with the negativity. And that happens. And it's really an insidious, sad thing to see. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunate.
It's easy to get sucked into that vortex. And I read something a while back that said, particularly in the technology and television arena, if whatever is being presented to you is free, then you're the product.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. They're serving that up to make money off of us.
Yes.
And you kind of get sucked into that narrow space. And gosh, there's so much good going on around you and outside. Mm-hmm. And even this is silly. I live in Wisconsin, so spring is a big deal. Like we're all just coming out from hibernation, and to see the world come back to life is really rejuvenating. And we joke here that it makes, the seasons teach us gratitude. You go through these really cold, horrible, dark, bleak days, and then the summer is just spectacular. It just teaches you to appreciate those moments, but you wouldn't notice them if you're just sitting down watching the news.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. More practical stuff. The gratitude walk, right? Mm-hmm. So my man, John Gordon, I love his podcast. He's written a bunch of New York Times bestsellers. He's the positivity guy, I think he calls himself, but he's really fascinating. He works with sports teams, professional athletes, et cetera. But he tells a story about himself and how he was in 2008, basically on the verge of, divorce, and had lost his job in that tech crash 2008 wasn't the tech. Sorry, I'm showing my age there, but it was the Great Recession. But basically he was like, I had to do something. And so he started going on walks every day and just talking about what he was grateful for. And it changed him, and so there's many ways to do that. You can write things down, and I've tried probably all of them. I think journaling is especially hard. In the mornings when I have my coffee and read or something, I'll pull open, a journal. Somebody gave me a men's journal once.
Oh, I'm terrible at journaling. It's hard.
Look at a blank piece of paper and think about what to write on that thing. And that's really hard, but it makes you think. It makes you gather your thoughts. I recommend people try it. I'm not doing it at this moment. I'm trying to do these gratitude walks, which are also very cheesy and feel weird, by the way. I remember the first time I did it and I was like, what do I do now? Do I just start saying stuff out loud? This is so weird and, it's awkward. But, make it your own. And, but it makes a difference just taking, and I think if nothing else, just taking the time, walking away from the desk, walking away from the chaos, the busyness, whatever's surrounding you, and I thought, is 10 minutes really going to make or break my day if I'm not at my desk or attending to something? No, that's a silly kind of thought when we think about it, but
I'm just laughing at your neighbors are probably like, who's this Charlie guy talking to himself as he walks down the street?
See you gesturing down the road.
Yeah. Luckily, I only have one neighbor, and I can kind of hide. That's true. I can hide from them and go, oh, they don't see me over this hill.
I was just going to say another interpretation of a gratitude walk. I had this experience last night. I was talking with my husband about this podcast, and what was so important and the message we were trying to convey. And we ended up reminiscing about something. We're talking about the airlines because he's a pilot as well. And something came up about 15 years ago when he was still in the Marine Corps, and he wanted to buy an iPad. The Marine Corps didn't provide it. It was new technology to have your maps and have that all on an iPad. And it cost $400. And that was such a big deal for us to scrounge together the money to buy that. And we took this moment, we're like, look how far we've come in our life. So it was like instead of a gratitude walk, it was like a gratitude walk down memory lane.
Yeah.
And that was, it was a cool measurement and a cool little micro celebration of that win, of that financial win, and that persistence and consistency. And man, we've stuck it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Nolan?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it of just taking the time to do it. It's like anything, building a muscle. It'll, the more you take the time to do it, in little, it doesn't have to be something big. Even if you just, the moment you got out of bed, that's what I try to do, is like, even just the opportunity to be alive today, or my health. It's like, when do you realize that you take for granted your health? It's when you're not healthy. And, when you have some health issues going on, we don't think about that. And so it's just, the more you can focus on those things, when they get, if they do, or when they get taken away from you in the bad times, that maybe you'll be, have a little bit of a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I wrote that down, Nolan. I was thinking the same way of celebrating the small wins, celebrating the small accomplishments. I think this is particularly applicable when it comes to your financial situation, because we think all or nothing. Mm-hmm. Like, we want to have this full plan. We want to be able to fully contribute toward our plan or to pay down our debt. Mm-hmm. And you got to just chip away at it, right? If you're taking a step toward a goal, that's huge. Celebrate that. If you're chipping away a little bit at the debt, but you haven't gotten rid of it yet, whatever, you're chipping away at it. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate that forward progress that you're making. Because I think this tendency to want to all or nothing makes us freeze, right? And then it puts you back into that negative scarcity mindset. And instead, like you said, Nolan, you get up in the morning, man, make your bed, right? Isn't that the 7 habits of highly?
That's right.
You made your bed, huge win. Celebrate that. You got up, you felt good, you decided to embrace your day. It's those little things that add up exponentially, and it's astounding how different you experience life with that outlook.
Yeah. That's awesome. And, just as we run out of time here, we got time for probably one or two more, but I'll summarize real quick. We talked about some of these practical tasks, and early on, Nolan, you mentioned the planning phase. You nailed it with the planning and taking inventory of what's important to you. That was actually one of our practical items, is what is important to you, not your neighbor, not somebody else. What's important to you and your family. That takes a lot of thought and intention and planning. Planning is not perfect, but it's better than not planning, of course. And so that is awesome. We talked about practicing gratitude. Write it down, do a list, or walk and talk and be goofy like I did. Be cheesy, maybe the cheesier the better, right? And then we talked about stop putting the wrong things in your mind, because it's so adaptable that it's really kind of scary. But the last one I'll throw out there for us is, I love this idea, the article that we read, and I'll reference that in a second, the title of that, so people can look at it if they want to. But it said, gratitude by definition is focused on others' care or entities outside of oneself. It's not about one's own accomplishments or luck. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And by reading that sentence, that giving back, being generous of your time or your finances or whatever it might be, others focused. And oftentimes when I'm kind of having a pity party or a bad attitude or whatever, I think I should focus on others. And then the next thought is, but I don't want to. But none of this stuff is easy, right? So, but we know it's the answer.
There's science to substantiate that too, that says an act of kindness, the endorphins or the dopamine that the hit that you get from an act of kindness and from extending care to others far exceeds a sense of anger or control. Kindness is amazing for your positivity and it comes back to you tenfold. Thinking of others is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. But it feels so good to be angry and, self-righteous sometimes, right?
That's like the sugar high. You need the long-term nutrition.
There we go.
Not
Okay,
the
good.
Quick hit. Yeah.
Nolan, what do you got?
Nothing on that. I think you said it all on that topic.
Well, that's good, man. Well, as we
I
wrap
got one
up
other
here,
thing that I wanted to jump in and say.
Please do it.
Nolan said something earlier that I thought was really important, that I think people fear that stopping the grind or stopping trying to achieve more or getting this concept of enough is the idea of settling. Like chasing gratitude for what you have is settling. And that's such a misnomer, that I think to find gratitude in what you have and what you're able to do for others is a really important part of the journey of future success and expanding upon what you have to contribute. It's not settling, right? Measuring these things doesn't mean you're done. Doesn't mean you're ending here. Mm-hmm. It's just part of it's making the future path even more abundant.
Yeah, we talk about that in our business. It's okay, and it's very possible to be content and ambitious at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And those two are sometimes feel contradictory ideas, but they're okay to have both of them. So very good, y'all. That was fun. I hope we got our ideas across. That's the challenge. Something in my mind, I'm like, that sounded better in my mind. But anyway.
It all sounds better in my mind. And then I open my mouth and it just sounds terrible. It all sounds so much better in my mind.
I enjoyed talking to you all about it. Nolan, thanks for your wisdom and joining us today as well. So I'm excited. And so we thank all of our pilot tribe out there and all the others that listen to us as well. Again, thanks for the rating and reviews. That really helps. We appreciate it. And let us know of any other topics you want to cover. We're going to be covering, get back to the technical aspects here soon. We'll be covering market-based cash balance plan and a potential tax bomb. And so that's going to be fun to talk about. I might get the professor back on for that one too.
He was so excited talking about taxes in the last podcast.
He's preparing.
I love this side of Kevin. Got to definitely tune in for that.
He's preparing right now. So we thank you, and we'll see you next time. Hello, Pilot Podcast family. Charlie here. I just wanted to share with you something we've just recently developed. In the show notes, you're going to see the Pilot Wealth Index. We want you to check it out. Give it a shot. It's a quiz, a short questionnaire that allows you to understand, are you on track? We have a lot of people that say, hey, we just want to know if we're on track. Are we where we should be at this stage of our flying career, airline career, whatever it might be? How am I doing? Am I close to my peer group? Am I behind? Am I ahead? We've developed some questions, some metrics that we think if you go through this and check it out, answer the questions, you will have a very good idea of where you stand. We developed the questions that give an indication of, are you doing the right things you need to do to be prepared for an eventual retirement and that one that can be profitable for you. So check it out in the show notes, the Leading Edge Pilot Wealth Index. We hope you give it a shot. If you have any questions at all, reach out. Happy to help. Charlie at leadingedgeplanning.com. Again, that's Charlie at leadingedgeplanning.com. You can call or text me on my cell, 865-328-4969. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Pilot Money Guys podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen. We are grateful for your reviews because they encourage others to listen in. Visit leadingedgeplanning.com to learn more and subscribe to our newsletter. Leading Edge Financial Planning, LLC, LEFP, is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where LEFP and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For additional information, please visit our website at www.leadingedgeplanning.com. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult your attorney or tax advisor. The views expressed in this commentary are subject to change based on market and other conditions. These documents may contain certain statements that may be deemed forward-looking statements. Please note that any such statements are not guarantees of any future performance, and actual results or developments may differ materially from those projected. Any projections, market outlooks, or estimates are based upon certain assumptions and should not be construed as indicative of actual events that will occur. All information has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but its accuracy is not guaranteed. There is no representation or warranty as to the current accuracy, reliability, or completeness of, nor liability for, decisions based on such information, and it should not be relied on as such.